Here's the thing, though. How are you gonna? Never mind. What link to me? I don't care. What link to me? What I was gonna say is we don't have the preview player set up. Is it still the same like one that we sent out earlier?
We could probably view on page.
Actually,
Here you go, pink, right?
I was just gonna take a picture of it there and the URL. Yeah. Oh, here. What did we? Yeah. How? Are you sending me to Facebook?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Testing. Okay, I answered that question. It's on. Good evening and welcome. I'm Ed Welch. As some of you know, the president of the university. It's a pleasure to welcome you to the University of Charleston. The university is a home of innovation, the home of good programs, and on December the 3rd, we'll be dedicating the Russell and Martha Worley Innovation Center, so you're all welcome to come back for that. We're very grateful that for 15 years, the Dow Chemical Foundation has sponsored the Speaker Series, and he says subtly that sponsorship is now available. I do encourage you to turn off noisemakers and things that will interfere with the speaker and with other people hearing what he has to say. Those of you who have been here before know that our practice is that you have the opportunity to write out questions at any time during the program. And when we near the end of Dr. Sabato's presentation, we'll collect questions. Some of those juicy ones will be brought to me so that I can answer the questions of him at the end of the program. And that's the way we handle the question session. It's always nice to have somebody here who does not need an introduction, so I can be relatively brief, and I have a sneaking suspicion that you're here to hear him and not me. He is the preeminent political predictor. He has a 98% success rate in predicting presidential, gubernatorial, senate, and house races. He does that through Sabato's crystal ball and through Twitter site at Larry Sabato. He is an author, teacher, Emmy Award-winning Rhodes Scholar, and he was the founder of the University of Virginia Center for Politics. He was here 4 years ago, and we are glad he came back. There are many people in this country who wish the election were over. I'm guessing there's one person here who doesn't want it to be over yet, and he's the person who's going to speak. Please welcome Dr. Larry Sabato.
Back there we go. Somebody turned it on. Let there be light, or rather, let there be noise. I'm delighted, Mr. President, thank you so much, and I appreciate your reading that as we sent it to you, not checking it. So he's so congenial. You have a very congenial president. And I met your lovely wife, and I can see why you've improved over the last 4 years. I saw you. And I did enjoy it 4 years ago. Obviously, this is a completely new crowd because I think I probably scared off the other people who came. So I'm delighted to have some new people to offend. That's what politics is, you know. It's very offensive. And particularly this year. This is a tough year. Americans are not all that happy with the presidential contenders. You've seen all the polls, and they do have, at least nationally. I know this is West Virginia. I know what your tendency is in this election. In fact, I think you're going to be easily top 5 for Trump. I don't know whether Idaho's going to beat you or Wyoming's going to beat you, or maybe you'll beat them all. But you're going to have a very high percentage for Trump. But the country as a whole, it doesn't like either one of them. They have the highest unfavorable ratings since we have had polls. We've never had a combination of candidates with this kind of unfavorable rating. At my Center for Politics, we try to promote politics as a good thing. We try to promote civic education, civic participation. So we try and ease the unhappiness with a little joke item, a curio item. We have, this little item here has Trump in red on one side, and it has Hillary in blue on the other side, and we suggest if you don't like either candidate, you get this clothespin and you wear this into the polls. And then you can cast your ballot that way, if that's the way you feel, because you don't want to waste your vote. The only wasted vote is a vote that's not cast. You can vote for Trump, or vote for Clinton, or vote for one of the third-party candidates, or write in somebody. I voted for Thomas Jefferson quite a number of times. Because I actually get to know some of these candidates. That's why I think a dead Jefferson is better than some of them alive. Not saying we'll do the same thing as we ever have. I'm glad to see you love Thomas Jefferson too. But let's talk a little about this election, because I want to get to your questions. I'm sure they'll be interesting. Now, we've only had one debate. There are 3 more to come, although the vice presidential one rarely has an impact on the election. Though I think both of these candidates are nice guys. They're very pleasant people. I'm sure they'll have a fierce battle, but I think they'll be respectful of one another. And I can guarantee you a lot of people after Mike Pence and Tim Kaine debate will say, gee, couldn't we flip the tickets? But the answer is no, you cannot flip the tickets. You know, that's just the way it is. We've got the choices that we've got. But we've had one debate. We've now had 4 random sample polls that you can actually rely on. Online polls are worthless, friends. They're absolutely worthless. They're fun, they're participation devices. You know, if it makes you happy, do it. Life's short, but it doesn't mean anything, the online ones. These are real random sample surveys, and they all show the same thing. Somewhere in the 50s, low 60s, think Clinton won the debate. Somewhere in the 20s to low 30s think that Trump won the debate. Now, those of you who are for Clinton, delighted to hear that. Those of you who are with Trump want me to leave. But I'm simply reporting the results of those polls. The real question is, what impact does it have? Not very much, at least not this first one. Now, we'll see what happens in the second and third ones. You never know, and I suspect this time Trump will actually do some preparation. We had one candidate who was over-prepared, and another candidate who was under-prepared. You know who that was, and he reminded me of some students that I've had over the years. They think they're very clever and they're very smart, and they are. But they still have to study. And so they come in and they take the midterm, figuring that they already have a degree in BS, and they think they can use that degree on the midterm, and then they get a low grade, and they figure out they actually have to prepare. And they do better on the final. So my guess is Trump will do more preparation, and I would expect him to do better in the remaining 2 debates. Now, whether he wins them or not, I have no idea. The first one it has a pretty clear winner, but it hasn't had a big impact in the polls. And we'll go through what the polls are showing, because national polls don't mean all that much. It's the swing states. You're not a swing state. You know, anybody in this auditorium can predict which way West Virginia is going to go. And you've got about 39 states with you. The tragedy in our country, as far as I'm concerned, is that we only have about 10 swing states. We could call 40 states tonight. I don't think that's healthy. You know, back when Kennedy and Nixon opposed one another in 1960, half of the states were really close. The same thing happened again in 1976. President Ford versus to-be President Carter. Half the states were really close, and strange ones. New York was extremely tight. And Virginia was extremely tight. Texas was close. So you had, all over the country, you had a real race. And the candidates had to go everywhere. And they learned about the whole country. Well, the presidential winner is going to know a lot about 10 states. The rest of us, and Virginia's not competitive either, what happened? You know, we had that darn Civil War. And sadly, you left us. And, you know, we've never fully forgiven you. I'm sorry. You know, it's just the way it is. We never fully forgiven you. But I think, you know, we've pretty much come back together. But just as you're turning red, we in Virginia turned blue. So I don't know whether you're responsible or we're responsible, but it must have been a reaction to what the other state was doing. I was kidding, by the way. I know we were taking it entirely too seriously. Mr. President, when I'm telling a joke, could you stand up and signal that they should laugh or something? It would help. Okay, we talked about this earlier, we promised. This guy's great, by the way. He's taking selfies and doing all kinds of things. You know, that really, I thought only people under 25 did. He's young at heart. I like that. So we'll just have to see what actually happens here on the remaining debates, but they do matter because this information seeps into the consciousness. You're not going to have any Trump voter waking up in the middle of the debate and saying, my God, I have to vote for Clinton. Or vice versa. No Clinton voter is going to watch the debate and say, you know, Trump is really convinced. No, we're polarized. This is a stark choice. Nobody believes me when I say this, but it's true. Over 90% of the voters have already decided. They know who they're going to vote for. The fact that you're here tonight, I'll bet 95% plus of you already know for whom you're going to vote. Okay? So we're talking about a small slice of the electorate that's truly undecided. And some of them are undecided because they don't know anything and don't follow politics and won't show up at the polls. So it's even a smaller slice that may determine the election if it's very close. You also have people supporting the two major independent candidates. The Libertarian Party has about 8% support in the polling averages, but because Gary Johnson didn't get into the debates, it's already drifting down, just like it usually does. And the Green Party candidate, Jill Stein, very same thing is happening. She was at 3.5 to 4, she's down to 2. Now, she knows she's in trouble, so she went up to North Dakota, committed vandalism, and got arrested. And you have to do that to get into the headline. You're desperate. You know. I mean, she could have picked a heavily populated state, for goodness sakes. A swing state. She didn't. So these third-party candidates are going down, down, down. My guess is the Libertarian will get, 4, 5, 6%. Stein will get, 1, 1.5, something like that. That's not to say they can't have an impact. You remember 2000, when Ralph Nader got 2.7% of the vote and literally changed the results of the election. He took both New Hampshire and Florida away from Gore and gave them to Bush. Just New Hampshire would have made Gore president. So let's just say Ralph Nader's not welcome in any Democratic candidate. It hasn't been since 2000. But these minor candidates can have an impact. So you have to watch them too. It's a close race. You know it's a close race nationally. If I were to summarize the 1,000 polls that I've read since Labor Day, every day, 5, 6, 7, 8 polls coming out from swing states or national information, you have to go through and read the intricacies. You have to look at the tea leaves, just to mix metaphor. You have to get all of this information, put it together. And when I put it together, I see a narrow lead for Clinton. 2 or 3 points. So 2 or 3 points can change. I mean, you have to watch very carefully, day to day. Actually, in this election, you have to watch hour to hour. I don't even sleep anymore. I keep all my electronic devices next to the bed. I'm a wreck. So if I get any of these races wrong, I've got a good excuse. Because my mic's working. I'm like Donald Trump's. My mic is working. I can't blame the mic. I'm going to have to blame the electronic devices. But he's a slight underdog. He may become a more serious underdog, or he could move up and win. Okay? Let's ask the question, though, that's a tougher question. How does he win? Well, first of all, any Republican nominee was going to benefit from the fact that it is tough to get a third consecutive term in the White House. Only once has it been done in modern times. George H.W. Bush got Ronald Reagan's third term in 1988. Why? Reagan was over 50%. He was about 53%. By the way, he was just where Obama is right now. Obama was at 52.5 average polling average job nationally. Reagan was about that point in the fall of 1988. There was peace, much more so than today. We're uneasy. It's not all out war, but It's the equivalent if you're in the wrong place at the wrong time. The economy was good in 1988. It's less good, particularly in places like this. But it's okay. We're not in the midst of a deep recession as we were in 2008. So it's kind of in between. But the real kicker in 1988 was you had a Democratic candidate who just couldn't get it together. And I'm not just talking about riding in the tank, which we all remember Michael Dukakis doing. Oddly, we voted for Michael Dukakis. That was when he was still Democratic. You switched in 2000. But it's tough to get the third term. So, my sense of it is the Republicans could have capitalized on this more had they had, let's just say a ticket of Kasich and Rubio. You combine Ohio and Florida, I think they would be well ahead at this point. The Republican base took a real chance by nominating Trump, and it may pay off or it may not pay off. We'll have to see what happens on November 8th, but it's still a big factor, no third term. There's also natural fatigue that attends any two-term presidency. You make lots of decisions, you make lots of enemies, there's a lot of scar tissue there, and Hillary Clinton has something that no other nominee for president in American history has. No, it's not that she's a woman, okay? It's that she is actually defending two-term presidencies. No one's ever had to do that before. And she's being held to account, as Trump did on NAFTA, that happened in Bill Clinton. She's being held to account for everything that happened under Clinton and now under Obama. Well, actually, it was one prominent exception under Clinton. I won't mention what that is. I don't think she could reasonably be held accountable for that one thing that we shall not mention. But everything else, she's held accountable for it. Donald Trump, and it's proven here in West Virginia, has tremendous strength in a place that often Republicans don't have strength, with white, blue-collar workers. Reagan did, but more elite Republican candidates don't. George H.W. Bush never really appealed to them, and that's one reason why he lost in 1992. Bill Clinton did. He was able to revive that for Democrats temporarily. But it's tougher for most Republicans to do that because they are identified fairly with Wall Street and the wealthy. Remember the 47% comment for Mitt Romney. All of these things make it difficult for Republicans to win as large a majority as they need with this particular group, although even Romney won a majority of them. But Trump really draws them and will draw a large turnout, and there are certain places, especially the Rust Belt, which are swing states where it's going to matter. And I think he has a chance to increase the percentage of the electorate that is white. Now, why am I bringing up race? People always say, why do you throw race into it? Because, fortunately or unfortunately, I tend to think the latter, that is how we vote. A lot of it is racial, whether people want to admit it or not. That is, a sizable majority of whites vote Republican. For Romney, it was almost 60%. And a sizable majority of minority groups vote Democratic. When you put African Americans, Hispanic Americans, Asian Americans, and other hyphenated Americans, minority groups together, Obama got somewhere around 82%. And a Democrat normally gets about 80%. And what's the overall breakdown? 70% of the electorate normally is white, 30% members of minority groups. Well, as the white percentage goes up, a Republican's chance of victory increases. As the white percentage goes down, the chances of victory for a Republican decrease. So we'll have to see what the final composition is this year. Who's excited? Well, to this point, it's been those white blue-collar workers. And that helps Trump. Clinton has had a hard time exciting even the base Democratic groups, minority groups, and she's had a horrible time with millennials. Of course, I have a horrible time with millennials. So I can sympathize to a certain degree. But she can't get them going. Obama got 60 to 66% as 2 elections. She's in the 30s or 40s. Now, Trump is 20 points below her, but the Libertarians, and the Green Party. That's where their strength is coming from. They're drawing disproportionately, easily double digits, 17 to 25% total, two of them together, from millennials. She's got to reverse that. She needs those votes. And that's why you're going to see Barack Obama, Michelle Obama, and others who have more appeal to millennials out on the campaign trail a great deal before November 8th. There's always the chance of October surprises. You never know what the surprises are going to be. Some shock to the economy that changes people's overall view of the health of that economy or the country as a whole. We hope not. I didn't even mention it, but some kind of domestic terrorism action. Foreign terrorism interests Americans, and we follow it, but it doesn't affect our vote very much. Naturally, we respond to what happens here in the continental United States, plus Alaska, and that will determine whether that becomes a factor in the election, more so than it already is. The Supreme Court is a key issue. I'm surprised the candidates don't talk about it more, because this is an election for the presidency, the Congress, and the Supreme Court. We've got a vacancy. You've got basically 4 liberals and 4 conservatives, and gee, that makes the 9th justice the tie-breaking vote, according to my math. But I was never very good at it, so correct me if I'm wrong. But both candidates should be using this to a greater degree than they are. It unites their parties, but maybe they will in October. And then I put this factor down for Trump because it's brought up a lot. Are there voters, particularly professional, college-educated, whose families and colleagues at work can't stand Trump? They're all for Clinton. And they're saying, I'm undecided. I just don't know what to do. I'll focus on that closer to the election, but they know very well they're going to vote for Trump. And it's called the shy Trump vote. Where do we get that from? We get it from the United Kingdom. There's something there called the shy Tory vote. There's a certain percentage of college-educated professionals that won't tell their colleagues and families they're voting conservative, but they show up on election day and vote. Do we find any evidence of it? I found about 1%. About 1%. It could be 2, but I found 1% comparing live interview polling with online random sample polling, not like the ones done for the debate. And when it's anonymous online, Trump does about 1% better than he does with live interviews. So maybe there is 1% or 2 with shy Trump voters, and in very close states, that point or 2 could make a difference. Now, I got to tell you, Clinton has the easier job. She doesn't look like she's been doing it, at least until Monday. I think she got a boost of enthusiasm that she needed. I don't know how long it will last. But the country's demographic trends have helped Democratic candidates really since 1992. And every 4 years, we change further. We add, on average, about 2% minorities to the total electorate in the United States. And so that means they get over 80% of that 2%. Makes it tougher for a Republican to win every 4 years. Now that's the average. I told you it's possible that Trump is going to generate a very high white blue-collar vote that will end up more than balancing that. We'll have to wait and see. There's contrary evidence right now in the surveys, and it varies from state to state. That's what makes this one so tough to predict, because there are Trump effects in some states and there are Clinton effects in some states, and they don't seem to be moving in tandem as swing states often do. Maybe they will closer to the election. I mentioned, minorities, particularly Latinos, are not thrilled with Trump. And the Republican Party privately is not thrilled with Trump because they wanted to attract more Latinos. George W. Bush got 40% of the Latino vote in 2004. A Republican needs somewhere around there among Latinos. If you're not going to win African Americans, you're not going to do better with Asian Americans, and you're not going to increase the white vote. Well, that's where Trump might be able to do it, but he's not doing well with minorities at all. He's actually doing worse than Mitt Romney, who did terribly with Latinos. He got 27%, and Trump right now is between 17 and 19% of Latinos. So you see, and with African Americans, it's single digits, depending on the poll. It's been as low as 2 and as high as 7. But, by my calculation, that means 93% plus for Hillary Clinton. The women's vote, we have a gigantic gender gap. I'm not saying it applies to this auditorium, I don't know, but I can tell you nationally, it's somewhere between 14 and 20 points. That is, the decisions of men are pretty much to vote for Trump disproportionately, and the decisions of women are pretty much disproportionately to vote for Clinton. And we haven't had quite this big a gap. I mean, 20 points is enormous. It may not be that on election day, but that's where it is right now. And Clinton has another challenge that she just hasn't met yet, and that is to win over the young Sanders voters. She's gotten the older ones by and large, but the younger ones, no. You know, when you're a young voter, you don't compromise, you don't settle. You know, they fell in love with Sanders, and they don't even have an infatuation with Hillary. So she's having a problem with those Sanders millennials. Now she's got Bernie out on the campaign trail. Maybe that will make a difference. I don't know. I've already really discussed the third party, so I'll skip it. But I'm going to show you my very favorite bumper sticker that I was sent. I get all kinds of stuff from people all over the country, and I appreciate it and put it on display. But this one seems to fit the mood. I think you'll agree with me. And I apologize to all the people here who are solid Trump voters and solid Clinton voters. But this is, you know, whether you like it or not, this is how an awful lot of Americans feel. But they're still going to vote, I hope. I think we may have a higher turnout than people think. I've been hearing, you know, ridiculous estimates. Oh, people are so turned off. No, because there's such a thing as negative partisanship. And you can actually push people out to vote by hate every bit as much as by love. In fact, I think sometimes hate is a better motivator in politics, at least. So I expect a pretty decent turnout. I think people will be surprised by that. When you look at the map of the United States, and this is the map that has more or less existed since 1992, and it's become more so. This is every state expanded or contracted to reflect its real weight in the electoral college. Because remember, our election's about the electoral college. The popular vote doesn't matter, and some of the national polls, by the way, have Clinton doing better because she's winning a massive majority in California. And all of those votes are excess votes. Because if you carry a state by one vote, you get all the electoral votes. You can say, God, we need to change that system, and I have good news for you. It's already scheduled to be revised on the 12th of Never. So put that right on your calendar so that you'll know when that's coming. But until the 12th of Never, we're going to be dealing with the Electoral College. You say, well, wait a minute, how about Texas? I mean, that's going to have all those excess votes for Trump. Yes, Trump will win Texas handily, but it's been surprising. I think partly because Ted Cruz only just endorsed Trump, and he seems to have a lot of opponents in certain segments of the Republican Party here. He's been leading, 7, 10 points instead of the usual 20 or 25. So he's not going to have that many excess votes in Texas or in certain other states. He'll have a lot of excess votes in West Virginia. But when you put them all together, that means that Clinton could win the popular vote by a point or two and still lose the electoral college. That's why you have to look state by state. You have to look at each swing state to see whether it's adding up to 270 or better. So anyway, there's just no question that Democrats have an advantage in the electoral college. Look how much blue there is for Democrats. This is where they normally start out. Look how much red there is for Republicans. Pretty obvious which side can usually prevail. And this is the electoral map normally as it starts out. The Democrat, any Democrat, mainstream Democrat, starts out with 247 electoral votes. Well, that's not that far from 270. You see why all the analysts have been saying for a long time, well, Clinton has so many paths to 270. And Trump doesn't because he starts essentially where Romney was, and he's having problems in North Carolina. North Carolina, depending on the poll you look at, is either dead tied, or Trump's ahead 1 or 2, or Clinton's ahead 1 or 2. They've got specialized issues down in North Carolina this year that are affecting the vote. So if you take North Carolina away, I mean, those are 15 critical electoral votes. Let's say he carries it. Let's say he starts where Romney is at 206. That's a lot further from 270. So normally you have set swing states, and some of them this year are really swingy. I think Florida, as it always is, as it's been since 2000, every 4 years, it's very, very close, and it's going to be very, very close again. Virginia is the least swingy now of these states. Clinton has her largest polling average lead in Virginia of all these swing states, which is amazing to me. I grew up in Virginia, and it was deep red for all of my youth and for much of the rest of my life. But now it's not. So that one is very probably Clinton's. Ohio is leaning a little tad. It's close, but it's leaning a little bit to Trump. Iowa leaning much further to Trump. Why? Because half of the state, even a little more than half, white blue collar. It's Trump's constituency. And there's only 7% minorities total in Iowa. So it's an ideal environment for Trump. I think he has a good chance to carry Iowa. Colorado's close. It's supposed to be for Clinton. It's not. It's very close. Nevada, I don't gamble, so I'm really not going to put odds on Nevada. But it's always close, and a lot of it depends on the get out the vote activities, particularly with the Latino. If they come out, it's Democratic. If they don't, they're not excited, then it goes Republican. We'll just have to watch that very, very carefully. Arizona and Georgia looked competitive for a while. Georgia is absolutely not competitive now. That's clearly going to be for Trump by a certain number of percentage points. Arizona, I put it in the likely Republican category because I believe politics is a lot like inertia. Objects in motion tend to remain in motion, and objects at rest tend to remain at rest. That pretty much describes red and blue states. And so it's tough to change the coloration of a state that is not a natural swing state. So I tend to think Arizona in the end will go for Trump, though I was shocked to see the Arizona Republic endorse Clinton. They were founded in 1890, and they have never endorsed a Democratic presidential candidate. They've endorsed every single Republican since Benjamin Harrison in 1892. So you just never know about these things, and we'll keep watching that as well. But, that's 85 votes, basically, that could be up for grabs, and they're the ones that change after a debate. You give it a week to bake, and then you see some of the states changing. Now, this is the way it was for a month after the two conventions. Remember, you had the Republican convention, and Trump went up by a point or two over Clinton. But he didn't get much of a balance because the Democratic convention, his convention ended Thursday night, the Democratic convention began Monday. So it squashed the Republican bounce, which was a clever thing for the Democrats to do. And the White House party always has the second convention. That's the norm. So we went to the Democratic convention. Clinton got a big bounce, in fact, far more than usual. And here was the map during August. Both sides agreed to this, by the way. Clinton had 348 electoral votes, and Trump 190. We pushed every state. We had to make a decision in every state. Well, things have changed since then. The bounce faded. And the competitive nature of American presidential elections has come to the fore again. And the difficulty of getting that third consecutive term in the White House. And this is pretty much the current map. You've got Clinton just over 270, 272, which means if everything goes the way that we have it here, I'm sure some things will change by November 8th, if Trump just managed to win New Hampshire 4 electoral votes. Well, that would switch the election from Clinton to Trump. And by the way, there are lots of ways for an election to tie at 269. We're going to have a 269 to 269 tie. It's inevitable. I just don't know what year it is. But I can tell you if it happens this year, Trump's president, because the House is going to stay Republican under the provision in the Constitution that will shock most Americans. Every state will have 1 vote in the House of Representatives depending on the composition of their House delegation. Yes, that means Wyoming, which has 1/70th the population of California, will have 1 vote for president, and California, which has 70 times the population of Wyoming, will have 1 vote for president. We may have a revolution if this actually happens, but the rules are the rules. You can't change the rules in the middle of the game. I think we can all agree on that. And Republicans will have at least 26 delegations. We follow the House and the Senate as well. And the Republicans are going to retain the House. Even if Clinton wins, they'll retain the House, and I think they'll have at least 26 delegations. So unless some Republicans defect, you'll have a Trump presidency, and I can't see it going to Clinton. Maybe they'll try and elect Paul Ryan. I don't know. This is such a crazy year. Anything can happen. But that's where it is right now. That's a lot more competitive, isn't it? And the states that are really, really tough to call are Florida, North Carolina, and Nevada. And I throw in now Colorado, not so much Pennsylvania. I know there have been a couple of polls showing Clinton up by 1 or 2, but you have to go by polling averages. It was between 3 and 4. Pennsylvania is a very tough state for Republicans to win. I hear this every 4 years. And the last Republican candidate won it in 1988. George H.W. Bush has gone Democratic every time since. That doesn't mean it has to go Democratic, but remember my rule of inertia. And, you know, Wisconsin and Michigan could be competitive, but I haven't seen it so far. And I am going ahead and throwing Ohio in, at least for the time being, with Trump. So this is competitive. Now, getting back to that central question, I'm going to wind it up now and take your question. How does Trump win? What are his best pathways? He's really got 2 pathways. He has to carry all the Romney states, including North Carolina and Arizona. I mean, he has to. You need that base if you're a Republican to get to 270, because it's tough. If he just flips 3 big states, he can win. Florida, I can imagine winning Florida is 50-50. It could go either way. Ohio, he's a little bit ahead there. That's easy to imagine. I just told you about Pennsylvania. That's tougher to imagine. Nothing's impossible. I heard Obama's, I was on Megyn Kelly last night with David Plouffe, who was Obama's campaign manager. He actually said, and I respect him, he's a very able guy, he knows an awful lot. He said, there is a 100% chance that Pennsylvania will vote for Hillary Clinton. And my response was, I'm a lot older than David Plouffe, and I don't give a 100% chance to the sun rising. All of you who are my age, you know, getting below 65, you know exactly what I mean. Nothing's guaranteed. So I don't think you can make that kind of statement. But yes, it clearly leans Democratic. But that's a theoretical possibility for Trump, a realistic theoretical possibility. And then you have the Rust Belt strategy, based on what I told you earlier. Gets all the Romney states, and then he sweeps the Rust Belt. Michigan, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin. It's exactly 270. Exactly 270. Could he substitute some states or one of these? Sure. I've already said Iowa, that's got 6. Nevada's got 6. I mentioned New Hampshire with 4. You can put together combinations of states, but it means that a candidate has to thread the eye of about 6 or 7 needles simultaneously. And with my eyes, I can't do 1. I don't know about you, but it's really tough for a candidate to do 6 or 7 at once. I'll tell you though, if he gets in, he's going to be an interesting president. Now that's an adjective I think we can all agree on. There are going to be some very big changes, probably even within 1 day. Some of them contradictory. But there'll be loads of changes. I got an advanced look at the transition plan for Trump. And I found out the very first change, and I'm going to show it to you, but you have to agree to keep it just between us. Okay, don't tell anybody else. The first change that's going to be made, right there. As long as it's solid gold, like, you know, I think it's great. I suspect a lot of visitors will try and take a little piece. Oh, souvenirs and all that. Look, I'm going to take your questions now. I want you to remember that he who lives by the crystal ball ends up eating ground glass. And we're a long way from November 8th. So I covered myself, right? I said, you know, it might be wrong, and I reserve the right to change any rating up until around 7 p.m. on election day, and that's counting West Coast time. Okay, so I'm generous to myself. That's how we get 98%, Mr. President. Okay? It's not easy to get 98%. But hope you'll subscribe to our Crystal Ball. It's absolutely free. Just Google Sabato's Crystal Ball. Give us any email address, and you'll get the Crystal Ball once or twice a week. We're only supposed to come out once a week, but we've had so many special editions this year because of the crazy things that have been happening that you'll get even more for your money, which is 0. Okay? So, Mr. President, I want to stop here, and I want to take questions because they're always the most interesting part.
So if you have questions, pass those to the aisles. I'll be bringing them up to me as they have already. So number 1. Will Trump voters in West Virginia throw the governor's race to Bill Cole, the Republican?
We currently have that as a toss-up because we can't call it. The polls show justice ahead, but that's before the election day coattail effect. And you can swim ahead of the presidential candidate, 3, 4, 5 points. You can win, if you're not of the winning presidential candidate's party. But, can you swim 10 or 15 or 20 points? It's possible, but it's really, really difficult. So that's Cole's chance to win. If you were to go by today's polls, and all the polls I've seen have justice ahead, I was just at Greenberg Monday, and he has 3 reserve spots there, and one of them said governor. So he was planning on it. A wonderful place at Greenberg. But I'm not sure. We try and call as early as possible as many races as possible, but there are certain toss-ups that we just have to wait until right before the election. We do call every race, which means we're wrong in some cases, but we will call the race. But that's what I'm looking for. Does Trump's margin stay enormous in West Virginia? Does it contract for any reason? Does justice show special strength that would enable him to survive as a Democrat? Of course, you've got a Democratic governor elected at the same time that you went Republican presidentially. And you've got a Democratic senator. So these things can happen in West Virginia. You are still somewhat bipartisan below the presidential level.
How accurate are polls these days? 2 things. One is that you have a loss of landlines that people used to use to call up folks. And then sometimes when candidates are hated, you do have more of those shy folks who don't want to say, I'm going to vote for somebody who's not well liked. Can we rely on the polls now?
We rely on them, but only polling averages. I have completely stopped trying to figure out which poll is the gold standard and which poll was poorly done. And again, I'm not talking about online, non-random surveys. They're junk. If you don't have a random sample, it's not even a poll. But all of these polls you see in the newspaper, they're done by different organizations. Some of them spend the money to do them right, and they're expensive because you have to call so many cell phones now. You can't rely on landlines except for older people. I took a poll, literally, in one of my classes, 400-person introductory class of students. 4 had a landline. Everybody else had an iPhone or cell phone or what. In fact, one student said, "What's a landline?" I'll have a landline till the day I die. I've had this number for 46 years. I'm not about to change, I like the landline. Yes, I have an iPhone, I have a cell phone, and so on. But I think it's really generational, and it's tougher to do polls, not just with the cell phone, but the refusal rates are enormous. 90-some% of the people contacted will not agree to be polled, or because of that little caller ID device, they won't even answer. Now, what do pollsters do? They weight the answers they do get. Say they get 3 millennials, and they say, well, millennials should be 25 people in this sample. So they'll take the 3 and they'll multiply it to make it 25. Here's the problem. Who's to say the 3 that were reached are representative of millennials? Maybe these are the 3 millennials who have nothing to do. They're not out on a date, they're not having fun, so are they representative? No. So polling has become the science of ABC, almost being certain, underline almost. And so no, I trust polling averages only because it's the best way to do what has become a very difficult procedure.
Will either major party make significant changes to the primary process by the 2020 election, given what's happened this time?
Oh, they all tinker with it. They tinker with it every 4 years. They change some things because they believe that it will make a big difference. It rarely does. I'll tell you what would make a big difference. If more of us participated in party primaries or party conventions or whatever the method of nomination is, because both Clinton and Trump separately were nominated by somewhere around 14 million votes. 14, sounds like a lot, doesn't it? 14 million votes. Our total turnout will be somewhere around, for the general election, somewhere around 135 million. So you see, tiny minorities are picking the candidates for president. I can't tell you how many people have said, how did we end up with these two turkeys? And I said, did you participate in the trial? Of course not. I wait until November when it really counts. Well, you're part of the problem. You're not participating. And if we got a better sample of people in each party, we might get different nominees. So that's the only thing I can come up with that would change the system, not the order of the primaries. You know, whether you have a primary or a convention or a caucus. You know, those are minor adjustments compared to broad participation.
Why do you think we have the two most disliked candidates in history? Is it polarization? Is it a two-party system?
I thought you were going to go on longer, Mr. President.
Or might
Water.
it be something
Yeah, I knew you could.
another factor?
Well, I really just answered that. I anticipated the question. I looked at my crystal ball and I knew what was going to be asked, and I had just answered that. Broader participation. Next.
Could somebody named Putin cause an October surprise that will embarrass banks?
Oh, they're going to be. I mentioned a couple of potential October surprises, and I didn't mention Clinton's emails because I don't know how boring or interesting they'll be. I mean, there has to be something in there. There will be some released, according to the court decision. There will be more released before November. Well, there has to be something that's explosive. You know, you can't have little cat fights between aides. People don't care. They don't base their votes on that. And if they do, they've already decided. They're already voting for Trump, so it's kind of ridiculous. But there could be something else. You know, these two candidates, and why would I associate the word scandal with them? But you know, there could be something we don't know about, somehow, that could come out before November. And I'm just blindly guessing.
Will the Republicans retain control of the Senate if Secretary Clinton is elected president?
If she is elected president, it depends on the margin. If she wins by a decent margin, Democrats ought to be able to get 50-50 at least. The tie would be broken by the vice president. We're going to have that for the first 6 months of the second Bush administration, with the vice president Cheney breaking the tie. But she has to win the swing states by a decent margin in order to carry in Democratic candidates in places like New Hampshire and Pennsylvania, where there are Republican incumbents, and Democrats may have to depend on some upsets. Senator Richard Burr in North Carolina, because Democrats are doing relatively well in North Carolina this year. Or one race I'm watching very closely is the one in Missouri. Trump will carry the state handily, but the Republican senator is in some trouble against Democrat Jason Kander. Nevada's a total toss-up. There are a lot of races that are very, very close. Democrats have to pick up 4 seats, and that assumes they win the vice presidency. They have to pick up 4 seats. They've got 2. They're going to win Illinois, oust the Republican incumbent in Illinois. They're going to oust the Republican incumbent in Wisconsin. Again, I knew you were going to ask me this. That's why I put that as the next slide. So they got 2, but they have Nevada. And so if they lose Nevada, because Harry Reid's retiring, and they don't elect a Democratic candidate, then they have to pick up 1 more. So there are a lot of variables here, and I think the Senate's going to be closer than it is today. It's 54-46. It's going to be tight, you know, a seat or 2 one way or the other, and it could easily be 50-50. But it's going to depend on the margin by which either candidate wins. If Trump wins, Republican Senate and Republican House, no question about it. If Clinton wins, she's going to need a decent margin to carry in even a 50-50 Senate, because Democrats have to pick up seats in places that are not necessarily open to a Democratic candidate naturally.
2 questions. First, is this the year that Pat Paulson should have run for president of the United States?
Well, I think he's dead, isn't he? I remember him from laughing in the 60s, which dates me. But yeah, Pat, for those of you who are younger, Pat Paulson was a joke candidate for president in 1968, when actually we needed him as well. It was Nixon versus Humphrey versus George Wallace, so Pat Paulson was a welcome diversion. And Paulson ran for president umpteen times. I thought he was dead, and if he's not, I really want to apologize to him.
Death is a technicality, and in West Virginia, we vote for president.
You're a card, Mr. President. You know, West Virginia, I knew West Virginia had something in common with Chicago. They don't get people.
Well, I guess the question behind that is, with all the dissatisfaction in what the process and the parties have produced, is there any threat at all to the two-party system?
Again, inertia is such a powerful force. Why do the two parties persist? Because they are very privileged in law. They're guaranteed the ballot position. The third parties and independents have to earn them, depending on the state, sometimes with large sums of money and flows of signatures. We have a ridiculous requirement in Virginia that requires them to get lots of signatures in each of our 11 congressional districts, plus more statewide. The two major parties don't have anything in common except this. They are almost 100% of every state legislature. So it is in their interest to make sure the pie is only divided in two, and it's not divided in 3 or 4 or 5. So they make it as difficult as possible for third parties and independents. So given all that, I think it's very unlikely, but anything is possible. I'm covering myself with that one. Yeah.
Forecast. If Trump were elected, what would happen? Would he resign within 6 months? Would he do ceremonial things and let Pence do the actual work? Or would he be serious about being president?
I'm not sure. I know he wouldn't resign. There's no way after spending all that money and time and energy that you would stay 6 months. They used to say that about Ross Perot. He wouldn't resign either. So it's really a question of whether he involves himself in the nitty-gritty of governing, or he relies on Mike Pence and Chris Christie and Newt Gingrich and the other people that would be in his administration or in the cabinet. And I don't know. There's nothing wrong with delegation, although certain decisions can only be made by the president. That includes, of course, launching nuclear weapons. Yes?
One person is deeply concerned about fraudulent voting, including illegal aliens. Any comment about...
I studied fraudulent voting. Is there some of it? Well, we just talked about West Virginia. That was your president. I didn't say a word. That was negative about West Virginia. I'm shocked that you would say that. But I did mention Chicago. I interviewed the sheriff once in Louisiana while I was doing a chapter on voter fraud. And this guy had admitted in open court that he had voted a number of dead people. And he explained it to the judge this way. I knew them and their families. They missed a lot of elections. I was making them better citizens. The charges were dismissed. It was Louisiana. You know, this was in the old days. So does it occur? Yes. Is it widespread? No. It really isn't. People think it is, but it isn't. When you go looking for it, it's really tough to find, even if you spend a lot of resources and a lot of time on it. So one fraudulent vote is one too many. I'm totally opposed to fraud and other evils. Just total. Just put me down in the category opposed to all evil. Remember that. But if I were spending money to improve our system, that really wouldn't be a priority for me. There are loads of other things like strengthening our electoral system and protecting it from hackers, whether they're abroad or at home.
Say a bit about the role of media in the election. Trump has seemed to dominate the news, and yet folks are also concerned about media bias. How do you see all of that?
Oh, that's a big question there. Look, Donald Trump has gotten approximately 3 times the coverage on network TV, including the cables, as Hillary Clinton. So those of you who are for Hillary Clinton would say, well, that's bias right there. Well, it depends on the mix of positive and negative, although she's got tons of negative because of the emails and other things. I think both of them got a lot of negative, but Trump has gotten more. Now, why has he gotten more? Well, I'll tell you why. When I'm sitting there at my desk, and I always have, at least 2 cable channels on at any given time, so that it can confuse me more. Trump will come on Clinton will come on for a speech, listen to a little bit of it, and I I know what he's going to say. It's the same thing, and it's written about the same thing. And then Trump comes on. And if even when he's got a teleprompter, you never know what he's going to say. And so you watch, because you know there's going to be a car crash. Is it a fender bender, or will there be a fatality? We don't know. But you have to watch. And look, television's about ratings. It's a business. It's a business. So of course they cover Trump more than they cover Clinton. You can call that bias if you want. You can say that ABC and CBS and NBC are anti-Trump and pro-Clinton. Probably true. If I knew how they voted, my guess is they're going to vote very substantially in Clinton's direction. You can't say that about Fox. I know those people. You know, there are a couple of hidden Clinton votes there, but there aren't many. You know, and there may be a few Gary Johnson votes, but mainly it's going to be Trump. And Sean Hannity will be voting Trump 20 times. You want Sean? You know, he's got a big stake in this thing. So, look, here's the way I look at bias. When I was growing up, and some of you were growing up, we had, you know, 2 newspapers in our town, owned by the same person, with the same editorial views. And you had 3 national networks, and actually where I lived, ABC hadn't gotten established yet. You didn't have PBS. So you had 2 national networks. And every night, very similar looking people would come on TV with the same stories in about the same order, and that was news. That was your news. Today, every one of us has a different news organization because we have different things bookmarked. We go to different sites, and we have our own combinations of news sources. Some of them may be bad, but it's freedom of choice. It's First Amendment. So we actually have far more diversity, and therefore bias is less powerful than it was when I was growing up.
I don't take full credit for questions, sir.
Yeah.
You have only predicted 98% of the races correctly. Have you analyzed the 2% you missed and why you missed it?
Yes. No, we have. We've analyzed it. And those 2%, it was voter fraud. We were out Thank you, sir. Allegedly. Appreciate it.
As a political analyst, do you think we'd be better off dropping the electoral college?
Oh, no, it's good for my business. It's just a purely theoretical question. Actually, I did a book on constitutional change called More Perfect Constitution. I came up with 23 ways we might want to consider changing the Constitution. I kept the electoral college. I did make reforms in it. I did away with faithless electors. And who are these people who decide millions of people vote for a candidate and then they're going to vote for somebody else just because they decide to do it? We need to get rid of faithless electors, make the votes cast automatically. And I had some other changes to it, but I kept it. I'll give you one practical reason why. Think back to 2000, okay? And you remember what the country went through, and honestly, most of that time, I wondered if we were even going to have a president. I always remembered what Bob Dole said when he was asked why he was running for president. He said, well, obviously, every country needs a president. And we needed a president. I wasn't sure we were going to get a president in 2000. What saved us? The Electoral College. Because there was only one state with the vote close enough so that we had to recount it by hand, butterfly ballots, and of course 10,000 lawyers flew to Florida. But suppose we had pure popular vote elections with no Electoral College. We'd never get a president. Because you'd have 250,000 precincts with 10 lawyers apiece going into courts in 50 states. I mean, the Speaker of the House would become acting president probably for 4 years. Well, the people didn't vote for the Speaker of the House. One district someplace voted for the Speaker of the House. So remember, there's a practical advantage to the Electoral College even today. Isolating recounts. We had enough trouble with Florida. 50 states? No, thank you.
Did the open primaries versus closed primaries have an impact on who's nominated?
To some degree, when there were open primaries, for example, Trump did better and Sanders did better. When there were closed primaries, Clinton did better, and other Republicans, depending on the state, did better. We just strong Republican identifiers who registered Republican voting. So yes, it does have some impact. And you know, Trump's was close enough in the end. You remember, he had to do a lot of bluffing to get into that nomination and get all the rest of them out. It's possible that if they'd all been closed primaries, he wouldn't be the nominee. It's possible. You know, it's hard to rewrite history and to reformulate it.
Is Hillary's health an issue?
Well, it is with some people. It isn't with me. 6 months ago, 8 months ago, I started getting emails, all of them predicting that she had 3 months to live. Well, you know, it's been a lot longer than that. I think they made a horrible mistake not telling the truth. I defended her when it was fainting. I fainted. Most people in here fainted. Not son or something. It happens. But and I thought, I couldn't lie at it because obviously the truth would leak out. Sure enough, the truth leaked out after about 2 days. So it was completely stupid to do that. And she paid a price. That's when she really started drifting down in those swing state polls. She may have recovered some on Monday. We'll see. But beyond that, I know nothing. And I'm suspicious of people who diagnose others across the TV screen. I really am, even if you're an MD. I think you have to examine somebody. Maybe take a little blood, you know? I mean, it helps.
Given the gridlock in Congress, which candidate do you believe would have the harder time or the better time in passing legislation if she were elected?
Well, if Trump is elected, I think you'll have a Republican Senate and House. Now, you won't have 60 Republican votes in the Senate or anything close to it. And unless they change that rule, and might, you'll have to have some bipartisan support for big things. But Trump would have an easier time than Clinton would have, with one exception. If she wins by a significant margin and they carry the Senate even by 1 vote, then she's going to be able to get confirmations through sooner or later. They may have to do away with the 60 vote rule. But she'll get that Supreme Court appointment. She may get others, depending on when the Supreme Court justices choose to leave and so on. And she'd get her cabinet quickly. If she has a Republican Senate, frankly, I don't know how we'll ever fill a Supreme Court seat vacancy. I mean, and as others are called home, you know, they can be called home too. You know, it's a Supreme Court justice, a great job. It's all inside work, no heavy lifting. And they work 9 months a year. Who do these people think they are? College professors? They work 9 months a year. And so, you know, it's a great job, but you only get to do it for a certain period of time, and then things happen. But, you know, we have to have Supreme Court justices, you know? It's like we need a full complement of the Supreme Court, just like every country needs a president.
In your opinion, what do you think is the most critical issue out there that really has an impact on our future and is or should be debated as part of the election?
I hope whoever's elected that we have a real program to restore our infrastructure. We are literally on a path to becoming and I don't think that's something we want to bequeath to future generations. I don't know how it's paid for. Maybe you take money from something else. Fine. That would be a Republican way of doing it. Democratic way, and then, you know, some tax or something. I don't know. But maybe it's a compromise. I don't care how we do it. We got to do it. And we got to act fast. We really do. Things are falling apart. The sky is falling. Kind of. I hope I spoke you up.
What's the reason John Kasich won't support Trump?
Well, he's mad. That's one reason. I mean, clearly, he has a very different philosophy than Donald Trump does. Of course, so did Ted Cruz. But the difference is Ted Cruz is clearly going to run again, whether it's 2020 or 2024. He'll be running again. And I don't see how you can ever get a party's nomination if you did not support the nominee of the party at some point, even if it's just lip service. You know, go ahead and do it. And, you know, it was tough for him to do it. I mean, after all, Trump accused his father of being involved in the President Kennedy assassination. That's kind of a serious charge, really. And, you know, there were all these photos floating around, you know, and he was standing next to Lee Harvey Harvey Oswald in the sixth floor window. No, I don't really think his father was there. Now, I will tell you this will surprise you. I had Senator Cruz in my class a couple years ago, and we happened to talk about that. I did a book on the Kennedy assassination, and his father was living in Dallas at the time. He was working in a restaurant, and the boss let everybody out to see the president. He saw President Kennedy in the motorcade about 2 minutes before he was killed. So he was there, but I had to know he was working in that restaurant. So he would have had to run at lightning speed. He should have been in the Olympics to get over there to Dealey Plaza to do the dirty work. I really changed the subject of it, didn't I? That was on purpose. I don't want to talk anymore about it.
Interesting, is Black Lives Matter a political movement? Is it a factor in the election?
Well, it's a factor in this sense. Hillary Clinton needs a strong African-American turnout to win, period. She needs a strong Latino turnout to win, period. And so if African-Americans are turned off and don't think that, you know, she's representing their views about all of these confrontations between police and African-Americans and Charlotte and all these other places that we've been seeing and reading about, it's possible that turnout will be down and she could lose some swing states accordingly. So it's a very difficult high wire act that she has on that particular issue. So that's why politically it's important.
As a Jefferson scholar, someone wants to know, I believe Thomas Jefferson thought a revolution would be a good idea every few years. Is it time?
He did. He wanted the tree of liberty refreshed by blood with some frequency. And I've always volunteered other people's.
Last question. And it really goes back to the last question in the debate. But this person writes, I'm quite an optimist about the political world. However, it's discouraging to hear the public express such vitriol and hatred about the candidates they do not support. What are the chances the U.S. public will unite behind the next president of the United States?
Not great. Got to be honest with you, but I want to tell you, I have hope. My slogan, I've had my little stickers and t-shirts, I've given every student over the years. Politics is a good thing. Because what's the alternative? Oligarchy? Dictatorship? Worse? Right? What's the alternative? So we have to have a renewal of civic education and participation, starting with the young. That's one way to do it. And second, we have to remember that we're one country, and we have to do what we used to do, which is to give a honeymoon to any new president, whether you like them or not. We've got a new special coming out on PBS. We do one a year for PBS, American Public TV, and it will be on all your stations here in West Virginia in October. I don't know when they schedule it. You'll have to look for your local listings, as they say. But it's called Feeling Good About America. It's 8 months ago, when we were getting ready to plan this documentary, we could already tell it's going to be a horrible year politically. So we looked for a modern election where precisely that happened, where we had a good, vigorous contest, but between two people who respected one another and later became very good friends and worked on all kinds of projects together. And after the election was over, the president-elect, who had won very narrowly, 50.2%, he had a popularity rating of nearly 80%. And it was 1976. It was President Gerald Ford versus President-to-be Jimmy Carter. And whatever you thought about them individually, it was a great campaign because mostly it elevated us. It was the bicentennial year. And the title of the documentary, Feeling Good About America, comes from Ford's TV ads. He had a jingle, I'm feeling good about America. And because we were feeling good, the economy was getting better, and we were finally out of Vietnam, and Watergate was over with. Yeah, people were unhappy about the Nixon party, but that faded as we got later into 1976. And so the country was coming together. And it was wonderful to see and wonderful to feel, and this song kind of brings it all together. The 1970s, remember, the me decade. And one of the lines was, I'm feeling good about America. I'm feeling good about me. And we need that again. We need that kind of spirit again. And we can have it if we make up our minds to do it. will. Thank you so much.